Pressure tested, right? It's a word that you're going to hear a lot if you're talking or thinking about or looking into or exploring the world of self-defense and personal protection. Everybody says everything's been pressure tested. Listen, in this episode, I'm going to break down what pressure tested means, what the role of pressure testing or full contact sparring, what is the role of that inside of actual real world development when you are training to defend yourself or prepare for violence so that you can be able to protect your family, because this is just completely misunderstood and it is being used the wrong way, in my opinion. And I'm going to break down exactly why I believe this. Stick with me. My name is Greg LeBoeuf, and 30 years ago, two things happened to me that forever changed my life. The first is I was almost beaten to death by 8 violent predatory criminals. The second, through what I can only consider to be an act of divine intervention, I met and forged a lifelong friendship with an individual that was considered to be among one of the world's top combat educators.
Think about it, Greg. That's how you can fight outside your weight. Raw, street fighting, straight blasting, headbutt in the elbow. Because if you're in a slugfest, there's always a bigger, stronger guy than you. And they don't have any weight classes out in the street.
Yeah. Not only did this individual share with me the strategies, tactics, and tools for how to actually protect myself and my family from violent predatory criminal assault, but he shared with me the insight, the knowledge, and the mindset of what it actually takes to become a modern-day protector. For the past 30 years, I have done nothing but help weaponize other good men so they too can protect themselves and their family. Each week I go live and I share the strategies, tactics, tools, insight, and mindset that you need to become that protector. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Okay, so listen, I'm talking about pressure testing, sparring, full contact sparring. What is the role of that when you are training to prepare yourself to protect, yourself and your family from violent criminal assault, okay? All right, listen, there's a term, just in case not everybody's on the same page, called pressure testing, which just means everyone's like, okay, they use this as like a social proof right now. So you take a technique, a strategy, a concept, a tactic, and they say, I pressure tested it, okay? So what right off the bat, there's a massive bias in pressure testing. Now, maybe just for clarity, pressure testing is a real thing, and it absolutely has a place in your training and your development. Just like sparring is, in fact, a real thing, and full contact, hard, no holds, no barred, quote unquote, sparring is absolutely a real thing and has a place within your development. But what is that place? What is the role of all this shit? Okay, first, like I said, pressure testing has become a fucking buzzword, meaning that is what everybody says to prove or disprove the use of a technique, strategy, or tool. So you can have a guy who sits there and says, listen, let me show you the right way to defend against a knife. Just using this as an example. It can be punches, kicks, ground, whatever it is. So they say, let me show you the right way to defend against a knife. And then what they do is they say, we pressure tested this. And they'll record it and they'll video, so they have video evidence. And so they'll get their student or whoever and they say, okay, listen, grab your knife. Now you put equipment on them and everything else to make it look super real and super intense because we're going to go super hard because that's what pressure testing is. And he says, okay, he's going to attack me with a knife. Now he's going to try to stab me as fast and as hard as he possibly can. So he's going to thrust it at me. Okay, then what you see, okay, whenever you're ready, then you see the student load up. He's all geared up. He's ready to stab the guy, as many times and as fast as he can, in the stomach, of course, because they have kind of predetermined the targeting system almost. And then you see the instructor, and his back is arched like a cat, hunched up, ready to explode. He's trying to look like he's just standing there, but you can clearly see that he is primed and ready to execute whatever move he's about to demonstrate. And then, of course, without warning, the student attacks him as hard and as fast as he can. And at this moment, the technique either fails miserably or it succeeds perfectly as predicted. Okay, most people, when they're talking about pressure testing, there's already a hypothesis of what people are doing. So they're saying, okay, listen, I see this out there all the time. People are saying, just do this against knife defense. And I'm going to show you why that's a load of fucking bullshit and never works. And so they pressure test it. They create very specific circumstances. They set the drill up, and then they demonstrate it, and lo and behold, their hypothesis was correct. If you want it to fail, it will fail because you can create the ingredients to where it will fail. Okay, just like you can manipulate and create the ingredients so it will succeed. There is a natural bias in people's thinking and in people's actions. Now, this is not everybody, this is not all the time. There has been and there is times when throughout the course of people's natural training, as you got guys training and they get to a higher level, and so they are going harder. They're going harder with less cooperation, most likely, well, hopefully with less equipment, and I'll explain that more in a second. But there's moments where they are trying their very best in a much more organic situation through just training, drilling, sparring, and they find that chronically a technique, a strategy, a tactic is not producing the result to the level they thought it would or in the way they thought it would. And so now they go, hey man, like we really have to look at this. I see this as a significant problem because I am struggling to make X, Y, or Z work under these conditions. Now you can say that you have discovered something under pressure testing conditions. Okay, so like I said, pressure testing is a real thing and it does exist. What I more want to break down is A, what's the role of pressure testing or hard sparring in your development? And more so, try to give people some insights as to why I think the vast majority of people's pressure testing, quote unquote, fails, or how and why they use full contact sparring in actually a way that is way more harmful than it is, beneficial. Okay, so let's just try to break this down a bit. Now, most people are probably understand a little bit, okay, what is pressure testing? What is full contact sparring? So let's try to jump to an end result. What is the thing that we hope to accomplish by doing these two things inside of our training? Okay, well, reality. This is always a big buzzword, right? We're trying to make our shit more real. So I want to know that not only does the strategies work, the tactics work, the tools work, but I also want to know that I can make them work under, again, quote unquote, real world conditions. Because the reality is in training, you are never going to meet exactly real world conditions. Because if what you're doing is training and preparing for violence, then real world conditions must include, because it always does, lethal force. That means at the end of the engagement, somebody's no longer alive. Okay, imminent grievous bodily harm or death. So how are you ever, actually meeting the imminent grievous bodily harm or death requirements? Well, clearly you can't, not to the full degree. So you have to come backwards a little bit and say, okay, well, how do we get as close as we possibly can to mimicking the conditions, capturing the realities without the consequences? Okay, and so this is kind of like, this is where I think people get a lot of stuff wrong. So most people, when you say pressure test or full contact sparring, they just think about, okay, 100% no fucking cooperation, I am going to try to get you. So you have your partner, typically they're geared up, you're geared up, and now you go at it. Now, one of the things with this already is that if you have two people, because who do you typically spar with? Who do you typically pressure test with? Well, you spar or test, pressure test with people that are training with you. Meaning, let's just, for a very simple example, a karate student is going to spar or pressure test with his fellow karate student. So you have two karate guys, both trained the same way, both now sparring and attacking, trying to use the same strategies, tactics, and tools. So now they're going together. Well, there is an inherent problem in this. Because if you're training for self-defense, violent predatory criminals aren't often trained in karate, right? So a boxer won't typically run into another boxer in a violent life and death altercation. Now you might say, oh yeah, but bad guys have done some boxing, bad guys have done some ground fighting, bad guys have done this or done that. Some bad guys use pipes, lead pipes, which might be a stick just like we do in Kali, or they might have a knife just like we do in the Filipino martial arts. And so there's a line of familiarization there. Okay, that's true, but what you're talking about is just saying, listen, the guy I wear shirts and pants. The guy that attacked me probably wears shirts and pants too. Okay, but that doesn't mean that your lives are similar. It doesn't mean your experiences are similar. It just means there's something, one or two things that are in common. Okay, so I'm just trying to get that sparring and pressure testing actually has to be done in a different way than what most people are doing it. Now, I would call, let me just put a caveat in here. Sparring, so a boxer sparring another boxer. There's a couple things. One, if you're in a combative sport and you're sparring somebody who is also in that combative sport, well, it's probably because you're training to prepare for competition. So you absolutely have to spar, and at times full contact spar, other boxers, because you're going to compete in a boxing environment. That makes complete sense, right? But the same logic doesn't make sense when you say, okay, there's me and I got 100 guys, and all of us are training to be able to defend ourselves and our family from violent predatory criminals, okay? So mass attack weapons, close quarter, long range, ground, all of it, okay? The problem is if the 100 of us all training for that spar each other, then it's completely fucking different because we're not 100 boxers training to fight other 100 boxers in competition. So you know the other guy's going to be a boxer. So you prepare to fight a boxer. But in reality, you have no fucking clue. Matter of fact, most of the violent criminals that you would face, they don't have any real training. They have experience in violence. They have experience in utilizing weapons. They have experience in how to destroy people, how to ambush people, how to cheat people, how to manipulate people. They have experience in all of these different insidious type things. They think fucking evil. So in your training, you could say, yeah, but Greg, we're training to, be insidious and ruthless, and we're learning our doom on you strategy, tactics, and tools and mindsets. And so we are all also learning to use the tool of violence and stuff. Okay, but it's still different because at the end of the day, you have no idea of where this situation is going to take place. So what is the environment? What is the time? What is your state, condition, physical, mental, or otherwise? Who are you with? Are you 100% healthy or you're not? What tools do you have? What weapons did they bring? How many of them are there? When did they blindside you? How did they catch you in a life factor moment? There's so many different variables. So I want to just have this mindset so that when I'm talking about pressure testing or full contact sparring, you got to look at it this way. There's a really basic formula that we use, okay? And then this will make even more sense once I'm done explaining this part of it. You can either be, in your training, you are either drilling, right? So you're doing drills, you can spar, you can compete, or you are in full combat. And that would be real world, life and death, facing imminent grievous bodily harm, all that type of stuff. These are the levels: drill, spar, compete, and then ultimately the real deal, combat. Now, these are not hard shelves, meaning a drill is not just a one-dimensional thing. Sparring is not just a one-dimensional thing. So you don't just say, well, today we're drilling, and so drilling is just drilling. That's it. It's a static entity. And then you say, oh, well, now we're going to spar, and that's just one thing, one done one way. Well, we're just going to spar, full contact. And then you say, well, now I'm going into competition, so that's this is the comp. It's not. You have to think of these almost like old school equalizer buttons on an equalizer, like where you can fade up and fade down, from low, bottom 0, high 10, and you can fade in and fade out. Meaning, when your training is always going to be either on some level of a drill. So you could be drilling very, very light, more towards the 1. And why would you drill at a 1? Well, because you're learning. You're learning and practicing something, okay? Then as the person is learning and practicing, and now they start to master this, and I don't mean they start to become perfect. Don't think master like black belt and whatever. Mastering just means they're having the ability to do it with less conscious thought and less antagonistic muscle work. That is the beginning of mastery, okay? Then from mastering, you got to go to functionalizing, okay? But so you can be doing a drill where you are learning, practicing. Okay, so this is very conscious in your brain. So the drill is going to be very low level. But as you see people drill and they're learning and practicing, and you start seeing it become more of an automated response, it's not perfect, but they're getting it. The drill dial is going to be turned up a little bit. So now you might get to a 4, 5, or 6. As they start, and again, they keep working it, you might then take the drill dial up to 7, 8, or 9. Now, as you start getting to the higher ends of the drill dial, it actually is the lower bottom version of the sparring. So meaning, if you can think about it, there's always bleeding. It's like, it's like walking into a pool. There's a shallow end, and as you walk in, it progressively gets deeper, and then eventually you're in the deep end. It's not just either it's a shallow, and then all of a sudden it's deep. It's not a hard transition like that. So when you're drilling and they learning and practicing, and you start to see some of the mastering come out, they're already into the low levels of sparring. And then as they get into the lower levels of sparring, the higher levels of drilling, which are really very similar, but changes are occurring. Of course, the same process exists as we move up. So as they learn, practice, master, and they start to see some functionalism, the attributes are coming on, all this stuff starts to functionalize, and they get to the higher levels of the sparring, the 6, 7, 7, 8, 9 of sparring, it actually starts to take on some of the characteristics of competing, which is the next level in the progression. So now guys are sparring, it's harder sparring, it's almost a slight bit competitive in the sparring, but at a very, very low level. And then, of course, the same thing happens. As you get better and better and the attributes build, it goes from high-level sparring, which is low-level competing, and that progresses up to where all of a sudden you're in high levels of competition. And there's right ways to do this, and I'm going to explain this a little bit more. And then, of course, now think about what you've created. Well, if this is consistently how you are training, always either in a drill on some level, but that dial is always being pushed up, which means you can go from a drill and end up sparring and not even know that you're doing it. It's like the frog in the water. If you boil the water and drop the frog in, he'll jump out. But if you put the frog in the water and slowly bring it to a boil, he will just sit there and boil to death because he becomes acclimatized. Okay, so the idea of going from drilling to sparring to competition, and then ultimately, when you can take the dial to high levels of competition, which would then be what? Lower levels of real-world combat, meaning a lot of the elements that are going to be present in real-world situations, they are going to be present when you are in high levels of competition-type training. Not literal competition like out at a tournament facing other people, but like for us, for example, competition, we do have a way to compete this. You run scenarios, but fully developed scenarios, okay? Not micro scenarios, fully developed scenarios in three-dimensional environments. Basically meaning, if you're going to practice road rage, you actually have to be in cars, old cars that you can drive and have somebody ram into the car or have somebody unexpectedly get out, take a tire iron and bash out the windows so that you get to feel that experience, or have rubber bullet guns, simunition guns, and you get tagged with 2 or 3 rubber bullets, which doesn't tickle. You get what I mean? But you're in a full-out scenario. That would be higher levels of competition. Okay, now, this isn't even the main part of what I want to explain. I just need people to understand that you actually have to have a system for how you move people through that has to have bleed over, not hard transitions. Not, okay, everybody, you've been training for 4 months, and tonight is sparring night. And people are like, the heart goes up, the heart rate goes up, and you can feel the tension in the air, and everybody's like, oh my God, and then you just fucking hard spar everybody that night, and people go, yeah, that's the thing, you got to learn to feel those emotions and control those emotions, and that's the only way to do it is get in there and actually have the threat of being hit and hit somebody and all that type of shit. I'm not saying that doesn't work to a small degree, but it is a horribly inefficient way to do it. That to me is literally like someone saying, listen, I'm a farmer. Oh yeah, really? How many acres do you have? Oh, not too many. I got about 10,000 acres I farm. And then you find out that they're still doing it with an ox and a plow. And you're like, what the fuck? Oh yeah, no, I got to get out to get old Betsy up there, strap her up, and move and plow through the dirt. You know what I mean? Like, how are you farming? You are literally farming in an antiquated manner. Now, maybe you like that. Maybe that's, part of the thrill for farming for you. But if your goal is to be efficient, right, it is a horrible way to do that. If what is happening at clubs is they are just most nights doing a series of drills, so they're just training, and then all of a sudden, literally the next night or one night out of the month or every Friday night, it's, okay, now we're sparring. Okay, now in 3 months you're going to go into a competition. Those hard transitions are not they're not the best way to develop attributes, to develop the skill sets. Okay, they're just simply antiquated ways of doing it. So if you have this drill, spar, compete, combat, the next, and of course you have the levels where they're integration. That people shouldn't even know that they're sparring as they start sparring. Okay, even by the time they get into hard sparring, they won't even know they're hard sparring. It's just become it's again, the frog doesn't know he's being boiled to death. Okay, but always in that drill, spar, compete, it is always leading to combat, meaning everything you do, every drill you do, as you progress it, all the sparring you do as you progress it, all of the competing, the scenarios and stuff that you do are all always consistently pushing to prepare you for the real world combat. Okay, so that's the mindset behind it. Now, the last piece that I want to put in on this is that you have to now kind of, to fully get the understanding of what I just presented, break down that like sparring and pressure testing. What does that mean? Like what way? Like break it this way. You can pressure test or spar for the physical part of it. But like what does that mean? The physical part. Then you can spar and pressure test for the mental part, the emotional part, and even to a degree the legal part. So what I'm getting at is this. When I say we do a drill and someone's just learning something, most people go, well, listen, when we spar is when you are going to learn the physical pressures of combat. So in this drill, I'm teaching you a skill set. I'm going to teach you, it doesn't matter. I'm going to teach you how to elbow. I don't care what it is. I'm going to teach you a skill set. But what they do is when somebody is learning something, just for the very first time they're being taught something, they strip away all of the elements that they will need that makes something real by the time they get to their hard contact, full contact sparring or pressure testing side. Meaning, when you are physically teaching somebody something, so even for the first time, you cannot forget or separate the fact that ultimately, because I'm always training people for combat, so it means my sliding scale, I know it's going up. I'm going to move people through it. That means that at the higher levels, I know that they're going to have to do what it is I'm teaching them. Day one, teaching them something. Day one, they're going to have to do it under sympathetic nervous system activation, the SNS. They're going to have to understand parasympathetic nervous backlash. They're going to have to understand stakes and consequences and feedback of being hurt and pain penalties and all this type of stuff. So if we just talk about physical and we talk about just the physiology, when you're teaching somebody something for the first day, they will never have to do what you are teaching them. They will never get the opportunity to do it without physiological arousal present. Right? Does that make sense? Like the fear, the SNS, people just, the fight-flight model, which is a gross, that's literally only not even depicting half of the dichotomy of that. When people just say, oh yeah, the body prepares you to fight or flee. That is so kindergarten. But people go, yeah, well, but we're not worried about that on day one. Why aren't you? If day one drill, where the dial is set at 1, if your goal is to progress people up, you should be teaching them how to do something from day one and understand how to bring mild elements of sympathetic nervous system activation, okay, of all of the different stakes versus consequences, which means as they're learning something in day one, there is a consequence for them getting it wrong. People think, well, that doesn't seem fair at all. Like you just show me something for the very first time, and now you're putting a consequence if I fail? Yes, 1,000%. Why would I want to ever have been taught something that someone says, hey, I'm going to show you something that's going to potentially save your life one day? And I'm saying, okay, this sounds great. I have no idea what it is. I've never done this before, but they say, here it is. But as I teach it to you, I'm going to show it to you. We're going to go slow. But as I show it to you, there is a consequence for getting it wrong. Just like fast forward a year and on my first sparring night, and I got my hands up, I'm just using boxing as an example, and I throw a jab out at the wrong time and I eat a hook punch. Well, there is a consequence. There's stakes to when we start sparring. There's the stakes involved. That guy's going to try to hit me. So there's stakes involved and there's consequences for failure to meet the demands. Well, why can't there be, and why shouldn't there be, or should there be, consequences and stakes right from day one? You say, well, no, because there's no way they can ever, they don't know anything, so it's not fair. Well, life's not fair. Violence is not fair. Violence doesn't ask fucking permission. Here's the other question. When somebody comes to you on day one, why does everybody automatically assume that the evening after their first class, that person is immune from getting violently assaulted that very night? Most people are like, well, no, they always, people believe they have the gift of time, because most people's training programs are built off a 10 to 15 year model. Think about that. Meaning it takes 10 years to 15 years to get a black belt. Let's just say most clubs go, well, listen, most people don't make it to black belt. Let's say they make it only halfway through whatever people's belt systems are. So 3-4 belts in. That takes 5 to 7 years. So on day one, from somebody with no experience, who's there to learn to defend themselves, they are teaching somebody off a 5-year model, or off a 1 or 2 year model, or 3-year model, or whatever it is. Meaning, we're going to show you the beginner stuff. And then as you get better and practice and you continue to come back, we will progress you to eventually we'll get you to the point where you can spar and maybe you can do a competition or maybe you can run a scenario or whatever it is. Whereas what we do is, yes, you need time, but from brand new person, no experience, I have a 16-hour model to get them through what I consider to be level 1, the foundation of all the skill sets that you need to be able to protect yourself. Okay? There's 4 different levels, but the first block of that is a 16-hour progression. And I do 4 of those, which means my total progression to give you the full foundation so that you can defend against all 4 different predatory bad guy blueprints, of which there's 4, right, is 64 hours. So now if you take what I'm saying and you say, holy fuck, okay, so the whole thing, the whole foundational piece that you need to protect yourself and your family is a total of 64 hours. So that means that I have to take them from drilling, sparring, competition, and combat ready in 64 hours. And I break that into intervals of 16 hours each. So I have to get somebody to be able to go from drill, spar, compete to combat readiness in 16 hours through the different levels. And the answer to that is 100% yes. So when you're on a 16-hour or a 64-hour clock, you don't have time. You don't get to say, well, you shouldn't really be sparring for the first 2 years, or you won't really do any kind of real combat sparring or like pressure testing or something. You really won't do that for the first year or 2. Like little bits here and there. No, you have to, from day one, drill 1 in the learn phase, you have to be introducing stakes and consequences. They have to learn under those real world conditions. Now, I've just talked about the fact of the physical. What about the mental and the emotional or even the legal pressure? Well, what is mental pressure? Anytime that I'm teaching somebody something, they have to simultaneously be taught what the requirements are. Meaning, you have to actually identify the threat. So I've showed you to do X, but to legally warrant X, you have to actually identify these pre-incident indicators. That's a lot of mental pressure. Someone said, listen, man, I'm just struggling to learn this technique, or I'm struggling to learn this strategy or this tactic. And now you're also asking me and putting the demand on me that I have to be able to read that guy's body language or behavior or interpersonal communication cues. And then all of a sudden I'm doing something. And then a second later, you're standing in front of me with a legal pad saying, write out what all the threat cues you saw, why you did what you did, why you took your actions, whatever, so that I can be able to defend my actions to somebody like law enforcement or a legal system or whatever. And you go, dude, this is my second day, dude. And it's like, yes. But the stakes and the consequences that I'm putting on you are well within your ability to handle it. I'm not putting on, max level skills and consequences and demands. I'm putting on appropriate demands. But the difference is I'm not one-dimensionally training you. Does this make sense? If I show somebody something in the first day, they need to walk out. Not only have they gained a new strategy, gained a new tactic or a new tool, but I've given them the understanding as to how to identify when this activates our protective rights, how we would articulate this to defend and protect ourselves legally after it. All of these different aspects are all being taught simultaneously. This is what I call whole person integrated development. So when you are drilling with somebody, it cannot just be an isolated, sterilized, standalone drill where somebody just goes, yeah, but I'm just teaching. They have to learn the technique first. No, they don't have to learn the technique. Says who? Where's that written down? Well, it's just too much. You overload people. No, people are coming to you with a very serious problem. They need to learn to defend themselves. Well, that means physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and legally. So you have to be able to understand how to integrate all of that into every lesson that you're teaching. Every word out of your mouth has to be measured. Every drill you do has to be set up to include physical, mental, emotional, and legal demands. So they have to learn it all simultaneously. And here's the reality. People don't know, like, there's no one, if you don't tell them they can't, they don't know that that's not normal. I love training guys that come into me that have zero experience. Because when I start teaching them, and I teach them a strategy, a tactic, a tool, I teach them about the legalities, I teach them about how to recognize pre-incident indicators, I teach them about how to regulate physiological control and what are all the different physiological changes that occur in the body. I'm teaching all of that instantaneously, all at the same time. I'm teaching them the very first strategy, technique, or tool. The very first thing I'm teaching them all of that. Yet to them, it doesn't feel like they're overloaded because I've been doing it for 30 years and I understand how to integrate all of that knowledge, and I put that onto them and they just do it. They do it effortlessly. When I train people who have come from other backgrounds of martial arts, they are flooded every single time because they're like, this is too much. Because I've never been taught this way. They've always just spoon-fed me one thing at a time. Well, yeah, they spoon-feed you one thing at a time because they want you to keep coming back for the next 15 years until you get the black belt. That's a very good student, very good client to have for a business. I don't have that luxury. I have 16 hours to move you through drilling, sparring, competing, and combat, and make all of that and inoculate you against that. But hopefully what you can see now is the role of pressure testing or full contact sparring. It's not just about, one day you glove people up and go full contact. It's just such an archaic way to do this. So hopefully the picture that I've been able to paint for people is giving you a little bit of insight into how pressure testing and full contact sparring and stuff, it's the frog in water is the greatest analogy. You got to put the person in the water and you got to slowly bring the water to a boil. But you got to think the second you put that cold pot of water and you put that frog in it, and you put it on the burner, the second you turn the burner on, the element starts to heat. The chemical makeup of the water starts to change, starts to move towards the boiling point. And you just become acclimatized to that. You can't just put one ingredient in at a time. It's the same way when you're creating people that actually have to perform under real-world combat conditions, which is absolute total chaos. There has to be a certain amount of chaos and struggle and realities in every single thing, but it's got to be integrated physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay, so listen, I hope that makes sense. Obviously, there's a lot more depth we go into this, but this should, hopefully give you some insights into, how is your training being progressed? How are you training? Or maybe even more importantly, how do you want to be trained? Right? So think about it, right? Yes, you can still, grab an ox or a horse and strap them up to a plow, and you can still break ground and you can still plant, you can still do all that type of stuff. Or you can get yourself into modern day GPS driven fucking combines and all kinds of shit and just make things a lot fucking simpler and reap a better, harvest a more bountiful, kind of field, right? So I want skill sets, development. You got to move people from zero to formidable in the most expedient manner possible. All right, that's it. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, energy. Please appreciate the follow, the listen. Stay safe, stay weaponized. Chat again soon, everybody.